We're ready to go.
Wonderful. This is the ordinary meeting on the council on the 27th of October 2020, held via remote technology. I now hand you over to Chief Executive, Dr. Rosemary Dillon.
Good evening, councillors. Welcome to the ordinary meeting of Blue Mountains City Council. This meeting is being recorded and will be live streamed. An audio file and a link to a live stream is available from Council's website. The audio recording will be available on the website for 6 months after the upload date. As all statements made at this meeting will be recorded, your image and voice may be recognised and other people may be aware that you have attended the meeting. Your continued attendance at this meeting after this statement is made is taken as your consent to your image and voice being webcast. All persons in attendance at this meeting, whether addressing the council or making comments that may be detected by the recording equipment, should refrain from making any defamatory comments or from releasing any personal or confidential information about another individual without the other individual's consent. The council is not responsible for the statements of any individual made during this meeting. Any defamatory statements or any statements which include personal or confidential information are the sole responsibility of the individual who makes them. The council's Code of Meeting Practice sets standards of conduct for a council meeting. If any person in attendance at the meeting acts in a disorderly manner, or if a person makes defamatory or unacceptable comments, then the meeting may be interrupted by the Mayor or by me, Chief Executive Officer, and appropriate action taken. This meeting must not be recorded by any party other than the council. Members of the public have been invited to provide submissions to items on the meeting agenda in advance. Any submissions received have been provided to the councillors. I ask you to please welcome the Mayor.
Thank you. Dear God, we sincerely seek your blessing on this council so that its deliberations may advance your glory and the true welfare of the people of the City of Blue Mountains. The City of Blue Mountains is located within the country of the Darug and the Gundungurra peoples. The Blue Mountains City Council recognises that Darug and Gundungurra traditional owners have a continuous and deep connection to their country, and this is of great cultural significance to Aboriginal people, both locally and in the region. For Darug and Gundungurra people, Ungra takes in everything within the physical, cultural and spiritual landscape: landforms, waters, air, trees, rocks, plants, animals, foods, medicines, minerals, stories and special places. It includes cultural practice, kinship, knowledge, songs, stories and art, as well as spiritual beings and people, past, present and future. Blue Mountain City Council pays respect to elders past and present while recognising the strength, capacity and resilience of past and present Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the Blue Mountains region. We have one leave of absence in the name of Councillor Bowling, who is recovering in hospital as we speak after surgery, and I will tell councillors and the public that his condition is stable. That's moved Councillor Christie, seconded Councillor Hollywood. All those in favour? Against? Aye. Leave of absence for Councillor Bowling. There are no other apologies, I don't believe. I think we're all here. Confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on 29 September 2020. To move Councillor Fell, seconded Councillor Vanderclay. They're a true record. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Hollywood.
Yes, I just have a declaration of interest in relation to item 20. I know someone who lives in that street, but I will be staying in the room chamber.
Yes.
Room Zoom.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I similarly will declare I know someone who lives in that street, but I don't believe the issue presents any conflict, and I'll be remaining in the chamber. I'll call that both Romola's declaration and Councillor Hollywood's declaration and mine be non-significant, non-pecuniary interests about which we both intend to remain in the chamber. Any other declarations? There being none, I thank you. Before I go on to minutes by the Mayor, I might just get a sense of what councillors want to pull out early in the meeting, to give people an idea of what's ahead of us. Councillor Fell, have you got any items you wish to pull out?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Items 5 and 25.
Items 5 and 25, yep. Councillor Hua? You'll need to turn your microphone on, Councillor Hua.
Yes, can I pull out item 27, thank you.
Item 27, thank you. Councillor Brown?
Hang on. Oh, your 5's out already. Okay. I will call out item 13. Item 8. Item 13, 14 and 15. And item 18. And item 23.
Thanks, Councillor Brown. Everyone's microphone's off and they've spoken. Councillor Vanderclay.
Mine have already been pulled, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor McGregor. All good. Councillor Miles.
No items.
Councillor Christie.
I'm good.
Councillor Fernanda.
11, item 11, please.
Item number 11 for Councillor Fernanda. Thank you very much. Councillor Schreiber. I'll take it, Councillor Schreiber.
Neil.
Okay.
Neil, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Neil, thank you. Thanks, Councillor Schreiber. All right. Then I'll take, apart from mayoral minutes, so we'll leave them. I will take items 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, 10, 12, 16, 17, 19, 20, 21, 22, 24, 26, and 28 in Globo. Just check with the Executive Officer. There are no confidentials in that batch, are there? I don't believe so.
Mr. Mayor.
Could we? I think Councillor Hoare didn't pull out 26, which I would have expected he would have.
Well, he didn't pull it out. He's happy for it to go through in Globo.
I think 16 was.
Well, I'll speak to 26. I'd actually just like to speak a bit to it anyway.
All right, so 26 is out.
The 16 was a confidential.
Yeah, well, with 16, so I'll go through what's been passed in Globo. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, 10, 12, 16, 17, 19, 20, 21, 22, 24, 28. And with the with 16, note, councillors, you're also passing the actual resolution itself, not just to go into confidential session, but the resolution that underpins it. All right, everyone understands that? I'll put it. All those in, I've got to move Councillor Vanderclay, seconded Councillor Miles. All those in favour? Against? Declare those all carried unanimously, which takes me to mayoral minute number 1. It's moved myself and seconded Councillor McGregor. With this issue, we all know that the government's recently announced its preference for a tunnel. We also note that the strategic proposal for the movement of freight from the Central West to Western Sydney via the Bells Line of Road corridor is still part of a strategic proposal. The council requests that no construction commences on the Great Western Highway duplication until a comprehensive analysis, including socioeconomic environmental impacts, is undertaken for an integrated transport approach to freight passenger movements between the Central West and the coast, so that Blue Mountains road and rail infrastructure is considered as part of the wider state and interstate transport network. This mayoral minute also calls for the council to welcome the elimination of all other options for the duplication, microphones off please, for the duplication or bypass of the Great Western Highway at Blackheath, including the widening of the existing alignment through Blackheath. I I will note that we are calling on the government to confirm that the widening is off the table, that the council notes that a tunnel was the preferred option of the Blackheath Co-Design Committee for the augmentation of the Great Western Highway at Blackheath. The council notes that trucks carrying dangerous goods would use the existing highway alignment, as legislation prohibits these vehicles from travelling in tunnels in New South Wales. That the council calls on the state government to provide an undertaking to the community that of the Blue Mountains that a tunnel at Blackheath will not result in larger trucks using the Great Western Highway through the Blue Mountains, and that we write to the Minister for Regional Transport and Roads requesting a meeting between myself and the relevant director to discuss the state government proposal for a tunnel upgrade to the highway at Blackheath. Councillors, the main reason for me putting this motion is this. Once you get below Katoomba, and I'm really glad that we've got tunnel options on the table, I hope the government goes with a longer tunnel. In correspondence, I'll be asking for them to absolutely rule out the road widening, because I don't think that's been expressly done yet. But the fear that I've got is that for communities below Katoomba especially, there are no road upgrades planned, and yet the government proposes to introduce fixed rig vehicles of 30 metres long and B-doubles of 20 metres long, which will impact every community thereafter heading east and all of those other communities heading west until you get to where the road improvements would actually be. So while it is fantastic for the people of Station Street and other places that their homes are saved, and we celebrate that, we also have to turn our minds to the rest of the Blue Mountains community, and the government should take the larger trucks off the table, especially if, as they claim, this is really about just saving time for weekend traffic. If this is genuinely about saving time for visitors, and if it's genuinely about saving time for residents and locals, if that's what it's all about, and it's about safety, then there should be no problem removing a proposal for these larger rigs to traverse the mountains. Now is the time for us to turn our attention to the lower mountains, the upper mountains and the mid mountains, who have at this stage no road improvements planned. It is now time for us to speak for them, given the good result we've got in relation to Station Street and other places. I'll end my speech by saying the meeting timer is no good to me if the screen is off and I can't see it. I'll now ask if the seconder wishes to speak. Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, and I also welcome the fact that they've taken those two Western plans off the table, but I still retain a somewhat cynical view of the reason for this plan. I spoke with colleagues of mine out in Bathurst on the weekend, and their view was it was the whole thing was a device by the minister, Mr. Toole, to bolster his numbers in his electorate. I wish that they would just address themselves to the safety issues that they themselves have identified. The area between the Whipcord part of the Great Western Highway between Explorers Tree and Medlow Bath, and to the west of Medlow Bath also they've identified areas there that are unsafe and poorly engineered. And they do well to start with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McGregor. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Brown.
Thank you. I very much support this. I also agree with Councillor McGregor that this is, I think, actually a very cynical exercise. I don't believe for 1 minute, actually. I mean, I'm great. We've got Western Blackheath sort of saved, but I don't believe in that long tunnel. If you look at the costs, it's like it's going to be $5 billion for the whole thing. I do not. It's one of those cost-benefit ratios that doesn't stack up. It costs them $10 billion on the Inland Rail. That's 1,700 kilometres. There's something very suspicious about this. So I agree we have to really push very hard about removing the highway widening, because once they've widened Medlow Bath and then they'll do Mount Vic next, all of a sudden there'll be this narrow bit in between that has to be done. And then they can say, well, sorry, we can't afford any tunnel. So I think we have to be incredibly sceptical about how this is going to play out. I agree again. I think that for the further down the mountains, it's ludicrous. There was another accident at Sinclair Crescent and the highway recently, a very serious accident. And, you know, there's at least 3 places where we need more traffic lights. They're not going to want to do that as long as they're trying to make this like a freight corridor. And I think that is still, there's a madness in it, because it won't work for the freight people. There's too many traffic lights already. They can't get rid of them. They can't make it 100k. They can't even make it 100k through Medlow Bath. They have still be 60 through Medlow Bath after they've widened it. So nothing makes sense. I think the reports that the Blackheath Highway Action Group did on what an integrated transport system could look like, with a lot of the freight not going through to Botany, but actually not needing to come to the mountains. There's a whole lot that could be done with correct spending. So I'm very pleased to see clause 3 from a previous notice of motion I put up is in there, and it's in total. It was actually unfortunately amended when it went to Parliament that term, and the Labor Party didn't support the critical issue of no construction commence until we've looked at what a state integrated transport system could be. So I hope we just keep pushing for that. Whilst trying to support what the Blackheath people want, we need to keep the full vision of the fact that really we can't be a freight corridor. We just can't. The Blue Mountains can't. That is ludicrous. So I thank you for this. I think it's a good strategy, and I think pushing very hard around the fact that we can't have big trucks going through tunnels is also an important argument, really. And also to remember the Medlow Bath people. I do not believe that construction should start. I believe that the push to get Medlow Bath done is ridiculous. If they start anywhere, they should actually be starting at Katoomba and the leg there. When they started Medlow, they make it impossible to stop and not do the whole thing. So I think we should focus a bit on that too. If they really want to start, they should start at Katoomba with the widening. Thank you.
I actually think they should start at Lapston, but yeah, thank you, point taken. Any other speakers? Councillor Hollywood.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and I do support the motion as well. I also just wanted to, you probably can't see it, but basically this is the consultation document that I fished out of both my PO box and my letterbox, and at the end of last week. And I don't know how widely it's gone across the mountains, but it certainly, I'd already missed the first 2 consultations by the time I got it out of my letterbox. And I think it would be useful to know, might be just a question, not for the mayoral minute, but just a question for officers to follow up, how many households did get this. It's also a little bit it talks about Blackheath, but I would reiterate the point that I think's been well made, that this actually affects the whole of the Blue Mountains. And the fact that we got this consultation late, I think, is a concern. So hopefully Blackheath residents got it on time, but I certainly didn't, from 2 sources. So I'm concerned about that, and I do hope that people will participate as well, because it's really important that we send a strong message about the impact of freight across the Blue Mountains.
Thanks, Councillor Hollywood. Everyone else is in support.
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor
Mr. Mayor.
Schreiber has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I support your mayoral minute, and I'm really interested in point 4. Now, that has never been spoken about, and it was until such times we've put it in, well, you've put it in there to take it off the table, because to me that was always a sleeper. If they weren't going to do the tunnel, they were then going to go through the middle of town, through the middle of Blackheath and widen. So having that in there goes to show how strong we are, the way we believe. I believe the tunnel is the option. And the other thing, Mr. Mayor, when you have the the chance to meet with the Transport New South Wales. Could you ask them again about the black spots in Medlow, that they should be looked at as a major part of our discussion, that they are put back on the table to be done whenever they start to do that widening? Because I was through there the other day and they are very, very dangerous.
Thanks,
Thank you, Mr.
councillor.
Mayor.
Thanks, councillors. Take it there's no one else. Before councillor Hoare speaks, can I just note the numbers? Instead of reading 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 6, it actually reads 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We could just make that notation in moving and seconding and passing this. Councillor Hoare, are you against this, councillor Hoare?
No, Mr. Mayor, I'm very much in support of it. I won't.
You still feel the need to speak then? Good, yes.
Yes. Look, just very briefly, there's
As
really
did councillor Hollywood, I noticed.
there's not much more that I can add to the comments of the
Really
previous-
good. Then I'll put the matter. No, I'm joking.
Look, I just wish to reiterate my implacable opposition to the widening of this bit of the road. It certainly will affect every village from Lapston all the way through to Lithgow, with bringing more and larger trucks. There are certainly very important alternative options to be pursued to bring trucks around the mountains and on freight, not through the mountains on road. Now, the only point I wish to add is the very serious concerns and that have been raised about the unknown impacts of digging tunnels through the sandstone on the aquifers and on the hanging swamps and watercourses of the Upper Blue Mountains. So I wish to publicly thank the Blue Mountains Conservation Society for bringing those issues to the community's attention recently, and note with alarm the lack of studies that have been done on the existence and potential vulnerability of those underground aquifers from any tunnel construction. And I really think that needs a much more rigorous analysis before any further debate or planning has been had. And I would also like to note that there hasn't been, to my knowledge, there's not yet been a cost-benefit analysis. We were told early on in the consultations there'd be no business case, and it's my understanding that still hasn't been produced, which just seems to me to be absolutely absurd and scandalous, that a Conservative Liberal government would be proposing to spend billions of taxpayers' money without having an economic justification for doing so. And when the social and environmental impacts of doing so are only all too well known to us all. Thank you.
Now, councillors, can I note we're half an hour through the meeting and we're still on the first item and we've all been in fierce agreement. So I'm going to say, does anyone, apart from Ward 1 councillors who should always be able to speak on an issue in their ward, does anyone else have anything to say that is different to what's been said? If not, I'll put the matter. All those in favour? Against, declare it carried unanimously. Mayoral matter of urgency, standing in my name, is seconded by councillor Christie. It very simply states that we seize the opportunity now that we are doing the traffic study at Blackstone War Memorial Park, that we also get a report on what funding options may exist should we wish to actually go and redevelop the park, which is my desire, and redevelop it in a staged way. So we really should start doing that research now, so that when the traffic study is finished, before us can be the financial options that we will have to consider and to look at when we come to vote on the matter. To me, it's fairly self-explanatory. I don't think there's much else to say. Does the seconder wish to speak? No. Is there any opposition? None. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against, declare it carried unanimously. Thank you. That now brings us to item number 5. Who pulled that out? Councillor Brown, do you wish to move something?
Yes, I've got an amendment I wish to move.
Okay, well, Councillor Hollywood moves the motion. Councillor Fell seconds it. I'm going to take Councillor Brown's amendment.
Well, why can't I just move the amendment first?
Well,
Yeah.
I've taken the other two because their hands are up, but I'll come to you for the amendment. So move the amendment.
Okay.
Do you wish to move an amendment?
Yes, well, I think everyone saw it. Did they? So essentially, I'm supporting them. It's not obviously I'm supporting the motion. The amendment is simply 2 points that between now and 26, we actually investigate the potential, particularly with all the new technology that's developing, for having both the food and the green waste composting here in the mountains. And I can talk a bit about that technology. So it's not going to Delaney. And the other one was, and the second clause is just related to what we are doing, but emphasising it, just educating people to compost at home.
Before I go to the mover and seconder, I take it the staff have got no objection to this. It still maintains the general thrust of the original motion. Is that right, CEO?
That's correct, Mark.
Yep. Mover and seconder, are you content to take what Councillor Brown has suggested on board?
Well, I should be able to put my amendment myself, because normally the amendment would go first, and if that fails, then it goes back to the motion.
That's only the case if the mover and seconder won't take it on board. So I'm going to ask the mover and seconder, are you content to take it on board? You are? Yep. Okay, it's taken on board, but Councillor Brown will note for the minutes that you've put this forward and that it's been taken on board. So that'll be recorded in the minutes. Okay, does the mover wish to speak?
I'll reserve my right to speak, and just in case I need to speak at the end.
Does the seconder wish to speak?
Not at this stage. I'll reserve my right.
Councillor Brown, do you wish to have the call?
Yes, I started to say it anyway.
Yep.
I mean, I agree when we look at the figures at the moment for the amount of food waste in the mountains that's going to landfill. It's actually quite shocking. And I maintain my view that it's so unnecessary when we have 92% of us still living sort of in homes and gardens. And I feel there is just a lack of awareness, and people think it's harder than it is. And I noticed the staff, even when I looked on the website to come here, there was a flashing thing about, food and not wasting food. And so I think the education of this, we've got 6 years to do it, to really try and get across to people, about not wasting food in the first place, but then that they can compost it, and the value both to their own gardens and obviously to landfill. So I really want to push that. The other thing I'll just say is that there is now this growth in the technology with big grants that for composting facilities that, for instance, on a small scale, Lura Garage have, where the food waste goes down to 10% of its size in 1 week. So you've lost 90% of the bulk. It's like coffee grounds. And there's very large scale machinery of that, versions of that. So I think what would be fantastic for us as a sustainable council in a World Heritage area is to really have that cutting edge technology where we're not trucking waste a long way. It's actually being recycled here and composted here, and that people can then come and get that compost locally. So I just feel it's an opportunity, now that we know we've got 6 years, to really start looking at the technologies that are coming out and the potential for us to actually keep our green and food waste in the mountains and putting it back into the earth here. So I acknowledge that we have to stop food going to landfill, but just to really try and do it in the most sustainable way we can. Thank you.
Ask the Deputy Mayor to take the chair momentarily. Give me the call, please.
You had the chair.
Yes, thank you. This report comes about as a result of a notice of motion that I moved some time ago. And the intention behind that notice of motion was to bring about a range of strategies that saw us putting less organic waste into landfill, and to build upon the gains of the 2012 Council when it introduced green bins. I'm content that this strategy starts that process. As we move closer to the time in which the contract is up for negotiation, I'm hoping that the cost of full organics is reduced sufficiently so that we can introduce it without burdening our ratepayers. But what I like about how the staff's responded to my notice of motion is that they have put those other measures in place. and they have set about a very clear work plan for those other measures that will reduce organic waste as we build towards the end of the contract, and they're to be congratulated for that. This report and the motion put forward tonight reflects what I sought to achieve when I brought forward the original notice of motion. I want to thank the councillors who've moved the resolution tonight, Councillor Brown for her addition, and also the staff for the report. Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I'll resume the chair.
You have the chair, Mr Mayor.
Is there any opposition to what's been moved? Anyone wish to speak further? Being no one, I'll put it, there's one matter before us. I'll put it all those in favour, against, declare it carried unanimously. And just for councillors, I just want to reiterate what I said earlier. In moving items in globo, you also moved items 6, 16 and 20, which were confidential matters. You moved the items themselves. I called that out at the time and there was no demur. So for the minutes, I just want to note that that has happened. Item number 8, who pulled this out? Wildlife areas.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I think
Councillor
I did.
Brown. Do you have
Yes.
something to move, Councillor Brown?
No, I think I'm just moving this.
Moved Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Fernanda. Councillor Brown has the call.
Look, I don't really need to say a lot on it. I support it. I just wanted to thank David King also for raising the issue and for bringing it to our attention again. And also for the information that Mr Langevad's provided too about the issues. And I suppose I feel that what we have here with the wildlife protection areas is, yes, in the way people, all our bushland and public land, in fact, should be wildlife protection without necessarily the monitoring, but getting that idea. And I'm just aware that the dog off leash issue is sort of dovetailing into this. And I think that's an important conversation for us to start having more with people, that not just in official wildlife protection areas, but that, you know, taking your dog off the leash just because you think he's under control or she's under control and having a bit of a run in areas like the Gully, which isn't even one of the wildlife protection areas, is actually very distressing to wildlife as well. So I feel with the wildlife protection areas, one of the things that's come out is it doesn't have much effect if you just have signs. It's really about educating people so they understand, certainly in terms of their dogs, which is only one aspect, because obviously feral animals is another. But I think that yes, that the wildlife protection areas aren't a magical fix. It's around what this council does do well, but I think we now need to start being a little bit clearer. And I'm glad that we're looking at more ranger checks on dogs off leash, because it is for people to understand the impact it has on wildlife, particularly in areas where there's bush care work gone on to create habitat and to bring wildlife back. I know there was a couple of very distressing incidents down in the Gully with dogs off leash, I think actually killing a wildlife animal. So I just thank you to the staff, and yes, we need to do some monitoring, but I think it's also about raising awareness, as is usually the case, in how humans behave. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Brown. Councillor Fernanda has seconded. Did you wish to add anything?
Just quickly, I just want to continue on with what Councillor Brown said about educating the public. I totally agree. I think people need to take more responsibility of pet ownership, and especially with the dogs off the leash too, and their cats. Council can do so much in terms of trying to protect and putting up policies. But I still think at the end of the day, it comes back to community awareness. And one way maybe is for when people register their dogs through council, is that they're given maybe an information pamphlet too, if we can provide some sort of education on responsible dog ownership, which does include how roaming animals do affect the wildlife when we register our animals. That may be one way of educating the public. But I certainly thank the staff for going to the efforts to undertake this study as well. I think there's a lot that can be done, but again, I still think it's ownership back on people. They need to be more responsible.
Yes, thank you. Any other speakers on this matter? Councillor McGregor.
Yeah, just and thank the staff for this survey. It was of interest to me because I live at the beginning of or on the edge of the Bonnie Doon catchment area, where one of the wildlife protection areas was, and I've lived here for 35 years, and I've noticed that in the last 10 or 15 years, there were fewer and fewer dogs and cats, roaming in the bush. But there was also an increase in wildlife in our front yard, as it were. And over that 5-year period, over the period the monitoring was done, we've seen a lot more macropods and lyrebirds, echidnas, bush rats, brush-tailed possums and ringtails around the house because the food's there. The water's there. It's easily accessible. Our lemon trees are regularly denuded of leaves. So I suggest one of the reasons why they're not finding many tracks and stuff on the sand traps is because they're all feeding in my place or other places on the edges of the wildlife protection areas. Just an observation.
All right, anyone further? There's one matter before us, I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. Item number 11. Who pulled this out? Councillor Fernando, do you wish to move something?
I do. I wish to move. I've included a number 8, which is that the council considers waiving the tip fees for residents in the event of a bushfire, as we did in 2019-2020 bushfire season.
Just a point of clarification, Councillor Fernando, you realise we didn't waive fees, we paid the state government the fee they levy.
Well, if we could do the same then, if the amendment can state that then, Mr. Mayor.
Is that seconded? Is there a seconder for that? Seconded, Councillor Fell. Councillor Fernando has the floor.
Thank you. Look, in regards to this item in supporting the community to prepare for the property for bushfire season, numbers 1 to 4, I do support. I do support this. However, I do have some reservations in the terms that number 5, with the council notes that the additional services are available to households that need them on a user paid basis. A little bit of information for the public. I brought up a motion last council to see if, in terms of preparedness, that we could consider having a one-off tip fee maybe, or a wayside service to help people prepare for bushfire season due to maybe the financial difficulty that some people might face. I just want to take note that your number 6, that the council notes that there is no evidence that the current greenway services are a barrier to preparing properties for bushfire season. To me, there is no evidence to say otherwise. When we look at the wayside service and what the requirements are for people to bundle those in certain cubic metres and to be able to clip the litter, leaf litter and branches, we're not taking into consideration that those people who live in maybe Bell 40 or flame zone areas where there is larger foliage and trees, etc. So sometimes it is very difficult to try to trim down and put things into bundles, especially when we're looking at an ageing community and people of, who may have difficulty anyway in preparing their gardens. Hence, a tip fee, a one-off tip fee, may also alleviate those costs of or the burden of trying to bundle things up small for people with issues with mobility or trying to have the resources to be able to get someone to help them tie up their bundles. I personally believe that if people know that there is a service where they can throw things in a trailer or have their neighbours throw things in the trailer for them that are larger that they can't prepare for the roadside pickup, that would help. And I do believe that in order for preparedness for bushfire season, to say that having a service such as this or a one-off service may hinder their chances or the reluctance for people to prepare all year round, I don't think that's the case. I think people are quite educated here in the mountains to know by now that you need to start preparing way ahead of bushfire season because it can occur any time. Look, I'm supporting it with the amendment I've put in, but I still think that, you know, as a gesture for those who probably live in Balfordy or the fire zone, it would be beneficial to have those services. That's all I've got to say. Thanks.
CEO, I'd ask you to have the director advise us on the impact of this. I know we were briefed on it. Obviously, during the fires, you and I made the decision, or Mr. Langabad and I made the decision to pay that state government gate fee then, and I know it had a pretty big impact and still is on the Waste Management Centre. But I would ask you to have the director address the financial and practical impacts of this.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Toomey.
Yeah, look, thanks so much. Look, it is outlined in the report that to provide a tip pass would cost in the vicinity of 380,000 annually if we did provide that tip pass. Look, we also did have considerable challenges in the waste management facility dealing with that as fire approached the city. We did have a large volume of material come in within a short space of time. It was particularly problematic to process that material and to get it through safely. As we've outlined in the report, the current green waste services aren't being used to capacity. We would like to encourage the community to use those services to capacity year round, to spread the volume of material to a manageable point for the Blue Mountains, and also to ensure that we're prepared before the fire is approaching.
CEO, through you to the director, is there any chance that doing this would actually impact the waste charges of our residents and raise costs for them throughout the year?
Ms. Toomey?
Yes, Mark, it will. All waste charges are user pays. So if we waive a fee at one point, it is charged in the raising of fees at another point. So that all fees would be raised to accommodate this reduction.
So if on top of the recent rate rises brought about by state government action, it could lead to further increased charges for residents who've had to brook those.
That's correct.
Okay, just to be clear, for residents, say in the Upper Mountains who might have experienced 30 or 40% rate increases, this may mean a further charge on top of that.
That's correct, Mark.
All right. Council, I see all the hands. Councillor Fell.
Yes, just a point of clarification. That point 8 that was added to the motion, and which I seconded, my understanding was that it was similar to the arrangement that we had where after a bushfire we would give the as we waived the tip fees or paid the tip fees rather, the state government tip fees, and didn't charge any of ours, that was what was being sought to be included in there. I just have clarification on that.
It is, Councillor Fell, but as you were briefed on this matter, that comes at a cost. And so we have to pay the state government their fee. They don't waive it, and that has to come from somewhere. It can put pressure on what other residents are currently experiencing, and that could be on top of rate rises.
But it is in the event that there has been a bushfire. It's not every year we would do something like.
No, it's every year.
That wasn't my understanding. I'm not in favour of that.
That wasn't my understanding either.
Councillor Fernanda, is it every year in the event of a bushfire?
Point 8 was in the event of a bushfire. So not every year, but in the event of a bushfire that the council would consider.
Understood. Ms. Toomey, in those years, would the impacts still be as you described them in those years?
Ms. Toomey.
Through the CEO, I'm sorry, I'm now a little uncertain. Do you mean waive tip fees as fires approaching the city to help people prepare? Or do you mean waive tip fees post the fire to assist people who've lost their properties?
It is the latter. So in the event of a bushfire, which could be, let's hope not this year, but whatever year, that in the event of a bushfire, that's when council will consider doing similar to what we did with the bushfire season that's just passed. So I'm not saying for this to be every year now. I'm supporting all the items, even though I did say there were some I was a bit in doubt of.
Councillor Fernanda, this is confusing, and that would still have a financial impact on everyone who's just had a rate rise. Would you be content to have a further briefing on your additional item, even though we were briefed on it, pass the motion as it is now, and you could bring forward a notice of motion to the next meeting if you wish to proceed, because there is some confusion and possibly we need to be rebriefed. I'd hate for us to pass something tonight that caused a further increase in what's already been a steep increase for some residents. So would you be content for us to move this motion tonight, brief you further on your proposal next week, and if you wish to bring a notice of motion to the following council meeting, I'll entertain it.
Will do, and let's hope we don't have a bushfire in the meantime. Because I think it's quite clear.
Council, I don't want a speech, I want a yes or no. If you want to press the motion tonight, we can press it tonight. That's a matter for you.
We'll go for a briefing then for my point 8, please. And I'll bring it to the next council meeting, another notice of motion, point 8.
All right, are you withdrawing your motion?
My amendment to that, yes.
Yes. Councillor Hollywood, do you move the original?
I'll move on.
Yep. Councillor Fernanda moves the original. Councillor Hollywood seconds. Is there any debate? Councillor Brown.
It's just that I do support it as it is. I think, in fact, this has been a really useful report because it's revealed to us that our service is being underused. And I actually don't agree that people, including myself, are on top of our bushfire preparedness. I think that is not the case. And I speak as a gardener, so I'm very aware of the state of gardens. And I think it's back to educating people. We have to get everybody aware of how important it is to keep on top of your garden all the time, whether you have to pay someone to do it or whether you do it yourself. I also think there's some really interesting facts, like who knew that it was only $67 for a second green bin? That is a bargain. That is an absolute bargain for people who do have larger gardens. And I think the fact that most people aren't using the second the second free, well, it used to be a chipping, but now it's a pickup anyway. And in fact, not everyone's even using the first. So we know, I think where we need to really go with this is back to education and really encouraging people and reminding people that that they're paying for the service, so they might as well use it to the maximum. I mean, I get in my green bin and I jump up and down on it till I got as much in as I possibly can, to the point sometimes where it's too heavy for them to take. But you know, that's where we should be going with this, is just getting people to understand that they need to keep on top of it. You know, it's like housework, it's like everything, you've got to keep doing it or it gets unmanageable. So I really support this report. I think this report is very useful as a guide to the fact that I think we are providing an adequate service, in fact, and we need to get more people to use it more fully. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, can I just, one more thing, I've got a bit more. I also want to point out that $380,000 is a lot of money. And we also made redundancies at the tip because of the debt we had. I mean, it's also from the cleanup from asbestos, but we've had so many costs on our waste account. So as well as either adding costs to the ratepayers, we've gone through the reducing the time of, you know, the hours, the opening hours, to try and recoup some of the losses we've had in our waste account. So I think we've got to be really careful about, because that impacts workers and it impacts lots of things. So it's another reason where I don't want us to be, I don't think we should be profligate. I think we should be really careful with extra expenses. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Brown. That's not on the table tonight, but we'll be briefed about it, and there may be a notice of motion from Councillor Fernanda about it next meeting. Any further speakers on the motion that's been moved, which is the one that's in the business paper? And I might ask for councillors who have something different to add to speak. There doesn't appear to be anything. There's one matter before us. Councillor Fernanda, can I thank you for your forbearance? I'll make sure that that matter is briefed on at the next briefing session next week, and then you can frame up a notice of motion should you need to have it brought before us. There's one matter before us. It hasn't been spoken against. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against, declare it carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Now, item number 13. Did you pull this out, Councillor Brown?
Please, with Councillor Hollywood.
Move, Councillor Vanderclay. Councillor Vanderclay, thank you for assistance in chairing the meeting. I appreciate it, and I will take Councillor Hollywood as the seconder. Who actually pulled this out? I think it was you, Councillor Brown. I'll just check with the mover and seconder. Are you happy to yield to Councillor Brown, mover and seconder?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yes. Councillor Brown has the floor.
I am going to support this, but I'm just raising my ongoing issue that we still are not including in any formal way any valuing on local tenders. And I'm not questioning that Moduplay, who are near Wollongong, won't do a good job, and they might be one of the groups that said they'd use some of the tenderers said they'd use local labour or local supplies, which is encouraging. But I just note again that until we formalise in that some way, we don't know. And I don't, that including people who are tendering and who might be out of the area, knowing that if they make a measurable commitment to use of local labour or suppliers, that can actually help their bid. And so I just say it again, I think it's an important factor when we see the amount of money that we are bringing into the area through grants and trying to keep it here. So I support it, but I just would like to see that criteria more formally recognised.
Thanks, Councillor Brown. Does the mover wish to speak, or the seconder?
Yes, just very, very quickly, Mr. Mayor. Look, I just want to thank the staff for getting this together. I've been driving past Wentworth Falls Lake in the last couple of weeks, and the amount of cars and down there and the traffic and the amount of people that are using the lake and this part of the Wentworth Falls area is absolutely fantastic. And this will be very well, it's very well appreciated. And I want to thank the council staff for getting it to us this quick.
Thank you. Seconder wish to speak?
Yes, I'd like to thank the staff as well. We know that this is actually sits behind a very volatile issue, which was the state of the old play equipment and the state of the soft fall underneath it. And the fact that we've been able to bring this, the design process and the construction process forward, I think is something that the community will be very happy about. And the other thing that I understand is that the existing play equipment will be able to be in place while the new work is completed. So I do look forward to full consultation with the community around the design process. And I understand that that is going to happen and that we're also going to be briefed on that. So yeah, so do thank the staff.
Yes, thank you. Anything further on this? Councillor Hua?
Yes, just very briefly, I feel compelled to add my support for this motion. Having brought up two young girls in the region, I know intimately how exciting a space this is for the community and how important it is for families and elderly people and community alike. We are frequent users of the lake, particularly in the hot season, and I really think the installation of this play equipment will make this wonderful park soar, and I wish to add my thanks to the staff. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Anything further? Okay, there's one matter before us. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against, declare it carried unanimously. Item number 14. It's moved Councillor Van der Clay, seconded Councillor Fell. Who pulled it out? Councillor Van der Clay?
I did, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I have a question through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CEO and the relevant staff.
Yep.
I noticed that the tenderer for the Blue Mountains is based in Victoria. Can I ask the question, have they looked at who are they going to employ to do this? And can that company do the work in the Blue Mountains?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll hand over to Ms. Toomey to take us through that.
Thanks, and through the CEO. Look, this is a national company that just its registered office is in Victoria. They do have offices in Sydney and they do employ local staff when they receive local contractors. You'll note that we do have the evaluation criteria in the report, and one of the evaluation criteria were the potential for the development of local employment opportunities, and they have scored them against that criteria, and Smart Cleaning Solutions have come out as the preferred supplier to that selection criteria.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I move the motion.
Yeah, you've already moved it, Councillor Van der Clay, and it's been seconded. Who did I take as the seconder? Was it Councillor Fell? Yes. The mover or seconder wish to speak? I think the mover's content. Seconder, are you content?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone else wish to speak? There's one matter before us. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against, declare it carried unanimously. Councillors, I mentioned earlier that Councillor Bowling had serious surgery yesterday, had a very lengthy open heart operation that went for some hours. I've just received a message from Councillor Bowling trying to get into the meeting, and I told him to go back to bed. So I think that's rather extraordinary. Anyway, item number 15, who wishes to move this? It's moved Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Hollywood. Councillor Brown, did you wish to move it?
Yes, I'll move it, but I just had a question, which was...
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Councillor Brown, Councillor Hollywood. Councillor Brown has the floor.
I just wanted to ask, I noticed that it's going to be done in 2 months. Is that right? Have I misunderstood that? Did I misread that? That it's going to be done by January 21. I just was puzzled. It's like an $800,000 contract. And is that correct?
Mr. Parsons?
Through you, CEO, yes, that is correct, Councillor Brown. We are proposing to do this within 2 months.
Can I just, before I go back to Councillor Brown, I erred. This was actually moved Councillor Christie, whose hand went up first, seconded Councillor Hollywood, given to Glenbrook Play Equipment. Councillor Brown, your question continues.
I think that, yeah, I mean, that's right. And of course it should be moved by an appropriate ward councillor. I think that really was, was surprised that so much work could be done and across the Christmas period. But is there a, I mean, okay, that's all right.
The Glenbrook community is very content, Councillor Brown.
Okay.
Very
all right,
content.
they're happy with it. Let's go.
Any opposition to this? Councillor Christie, do you wish to speak, or are you content?
I'm content, but actually just quickly, I would like to thank the staff for the quick turnaround that they're the 2-month planned construction of the playground, considering that part of stage 1 play equipment will need to be restricted to residents while construction of stage 2 is happening. So the quicker it's done, the better.
Thank you. Anything further? There's one matter before us. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against, declare it carried unanimously. And we now move on to item number 18. Councillor Van der Clay moves. Councillor Hoare seconds. Councillor Van der Clay has
I pulled this out.
Okay, well, Councillor Van der Clay and Hoare got their hands up. So the mover and seconder wish to speak?
I'll give, I succeed to Councillor Brown.
You yield, yep. Councillor Hoare, do you wish to speak? You yield?
Yes, I'll yield, yep.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, well, as the vice chair, I should have been one of the movers. Anyway, I just
Councillor Brown, just one moment. you've been in the council 4 years. I take the people that get their hands up, and that's how it's meant to work. So please, and I can assure you.
I pulled it out.
It doesn't matter, Councillor Brown. I'm the chair, and whoever puts their hands up first gets the moving and the seconding.
Okay.
Councillor Brown, you wish to speak to
I'll
it
have
or
my hand
move
up all
something
the
different?
time. Yes, I will speak. I'll have my hand up all the time. Will speak to it. First of all, I really want to thank the staff and the community members of the Heritage Advisory Committee. I think in my time on council, watching the evolution of this committee has been fantastic. You know, we have really built a resource for the council, and that's been I particularly thank Kim Barrett for her approach in that, and the community members themselves, and we've added 5 more. And the amount of engagement now happening, and I think what's happened that is so great to see is, instead of the Heritage Advisory Committee being like an alien, sort of almost an alien people who have alien interests, their advice is becoming increasingly integrated into council operations, including asset works, in a way that's really effective and efficient. And the knowledge that is there in the community members is, you know, marvellous. So they're able to contribute, whether it's with the Woodford footbridge and the council's position on that, with Pulpit Hill and Explorers Tree. As a woman who would never even agree to call it a tree, just call it a concrete stump, I have learned a lot about the importance of Pulpit Hill, that site itself, in both Indigenous and colonial history. And I think I see it all the time, and I learn a lot when I'm there. And I'll also say that the community members have done far more than just the quarterly meetings on various projects so that they can contribute more. The Heritage Forum that had to be cancelled because of COVID, a lot of planning has gone into that, and that's for built heritage, particularly with the idea of helping people to see the value of their built heritage and not as a liability, and to help give people knowledge of how to restore and manage built heritage they own, and also for businesses to understand that it's an added value and how they can add value to their business through it. So that forum was a great idea, and hopefully next year it will go ahead, and it will be part of the National Trust's actual Australian Heritage Festival. So we're linked in with the National Trust, and we have local members of the National Trust on the committee. So I just want to commend it, because I feel like it's how an advisory committee should work, where it's giving us all sorts of links into the community, and it's drawing a lot of knowledge from the community that are a resource for the staff. And yeah, so I particularly thank the staff for making that possible and really working to build that relationship and to fast track the added membership. And thank you to all the community members for all the time they give. Thank you.
I'm going to take that motion as moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor van der Clay. And that's Councillor Brown's moving speech. Councillor van der Clay, do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Chair of the Heritage Committee, I'd like to firstly thank Kim Barrett and her staff. They've done an absolutely marvellous job of supporting the committee. And the staff have also developing, just to let the rest of the councillors know, an app that will be going on I can't remember the name of the web page, but that will be for people who want to come and look at heritage items within the Blue Mountains, and it gives a bit of a story as we're going along. So that'll hopefully will be released either before Christmas or early in the new year. I can't remember exactly when, but this is ongoing work that they've been doing. And the staff, the Heritage Committee people, or the community members, some of them have been there from the beginning of the formation of the Heritage Committee, and they're very committed to what they do. So I want to thank them all very, very personally on with the tremendous work they've been doing. Councillor Brown has said a fair amount about the Heritage Committee, but it's been I've enjoyed working with them, and I look forward to working with them for the rest of this term, and possibly in the future. So I just want to thank them very much, and especially Kim and her team. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further tonight on this issue? There being nothing, I'll put it. All those in favour? Against, declared it carried unanimously. Who pulled out 23? Councillor Brown, do you wish to move something?
Well, I'll move it, and I will move it, but I just wanted to say a thank you as well
Okay.
on.
It's moved, Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Fernanda. Councillor Brown has the call.
I just really wanted to acknowledge that, along with all the wonderful stop signs that are going to make us all safer, I'd like to thank the staff for getting through that raised pedestrian crossing for Martin Street near the school, or the process for that, because it was, it was on the edge in terms of the statistics and so on for being able to do it. But I think outside of school, it's so important. And so I just like to thank them for sort of getting that beyond the original refuge island, and at the request of the parents and the teachers, getting that crossing.
Thanks, Councillor Brown.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything further, councillors, on this matter, this item? Nothing further. The second is content. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against, declare it carried unanimously. Who pulled out item 25? Councillor Hollywood, you move. Councillor McGregor seconds. Councillor Hollywood has the floor.
Thank you very much. I hope that people will support this motion. And again, I would like to say that this motion was drafted quite some time ago and relates to some CSRs that we also put in, and really speaks to the desire that seems to be growing within the community of community members wanting to work more proactively with council around sustainability and resilience initiatives. And this work, I think it's one of those things where, forgive the pun around planetary health, but where the planets are aligning, that there's, I think, through the COVID-19 experience and also coming out of the bush fires and the recovery process, people have been focused on what it means to live in the Blue Mountains, what it means to live in a city in a World Heritage Area, and how we can draw on the strengths of the community and the council as the closest tier to the community of government. So I want to acknowledge that the council officers have already been working, I believe, with community members, and that work is well progressed. So that's been happening while this motion has been attempting to get to the council meeting, which is good. So, and I believe that a report will be coming before the council next month as well. So I do hope that people will support this motion. I don't feel there's anything particularly controversial. What it's actually doing is just trying to send a signal and provide some reassurance to the community of how we might be able to develop ways of working effectively together on sustainability initiatives.
Thank you. Does the seconder wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Hollywood has covered it adequately. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers on this item? It's one matter before us. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against, declare it carried unanimously. Item number 26, notice of motion, moved Councillor Hoare, seconded. Councillor Brown, are you happy to second it?
Yep.
Okay. Councillor Hoare, do you wish to speak?
Oh, look, now it's there, I certainly will. Yeah, look, yes, just calling, I would like to commend this motion to the council. It's, I think, a really interesting idea that it's worth exploring in the Blue Mountains, particularly in the aftermath of the fires. As the report in item number 8 on wildlife protection areas showed, it's the damage that's done to our vertebrate fauna by foxes and cats is really quite significant. It's very hard under the current state legislation to put too many controls on the keeping of cats, unlike dogs. Some imbalances, one could say in the legislation. And I do wish to note that the Federal Parliament, the lower house, Select Committee on Energy and Environment has been recently inquiring into this matter and looking at the impact of feral and native and domestic cats on native wildlife. While submissions and public hearings have closed, I wouldn't imagine it'll be too long before we have a report from that select committee that councils around the country will be, and state governments more particularly, will be able to respond to. But in the interim, look, this is not a silver bullet. As an interim measure, I think the opportunity to use cat bibs to significantly reduce, according to the scientific studies that have been done into the use of this in other jurisdictions in West Australia, particularly in Eurobodalla. I think the idea has merit. It's certainly not going to be a cure-all. I hope it's not going to act as an enabling function, but I do think it's, if anything, if nothing else, it will certainly generate conversation in the community about the need to increase the amount of attention that is paid to the nocturnal predation habits of domestic cats, and I commend it to you all.
Councillor Brown.
I probably don't need to say much more. I support it for the same reasons. It's not that it's going to make a vast difference, but it's partly about educating people, getting people to start thinking about it. I mean, it still will make a difference. If every cat owner had these cat bibs, which apparently can reduce killing by 80%, that would make a difference. I think it's getting people to think of it and accept that their beloved companion, their little fluffy companion, is actually a killer, is one of the challenges with cat owners. So I support it for its educational value, and as Councillor Hoare has said, as a way of getting conversation going around just the number of animals that a cat kills in 24 hours, which is horrifying when they have done monitoring. I mean, I'd also note that the feral cat issue is massive, and of course that doesn't deal with this, but at least it's starting to help people recognise that the companion animals are a responsibility and they have to take it seriously. So I support it. Thank you.
Any further on this item? Nothing further. There's one item before us. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare Councillor Christie against, are you? I'll just call it. All those in favour? Everyone with Councillor Christie against. Is that right? Yep. Thanks, Councillor Christie. Item number 27. Who pulled this one out? Councillor Hoare moves.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Hollywood seconds. Councillor Hoare has the floor.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm really excited to be able to bring this motion to you all tonight. I really believe that a major contributor to the meeting our goals as a city to reduce our emissions can be met by increasing the number of and the reach of energy efficiency programs of and of renewable power. There's so many options that can be enabled by this very clever financing mechanism, using council's leverage as a rateable agency to make environmental upgrade finance available to both tenants of commercial properties and to small and medium-sized business owners. I think is a really fantastic way for council to leverage a vastly accelerated uptake in a whole lot of good ideas that really should have happened a long time ago. I do wish to acknowledge the improvement in refinements in the offerings that have been made available to councils around the country, and look, there's a great many examples of councils in other areas which are successfully using this financial instrument to be able to accelerate the transition to a cleaner economy. And I would be very appreciative of the time and effort of staff to investigate the options and how we might be able to implement them here. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anything further on this? Councillor Brown?
Yes, well, I proposed this, and I think Councillor Hall seconded it back in 2017. And from memory, it wasn't supported by staff. So it's interesting it now is. I mean, I do support it because I proposed it then. I do think it's another, tool that can be used. How much it will be used, of course, it's hard to know because we do have issues here just in terms of the ownership of our buildings. Often the businesses don't own them, and we know we have a whole problem with even when there's a 50% payment for painting your building, a lot of our absentee owners aren't interested. So that's a sort of ongoing problem for us about our absentee landlords. But I hope, nevertheless, that there'd still be enough businesses that own buildings or have are socially responsible. I mean, property owners, that they would, use this. And I certainly think it's worth us having it as something that we can offer, and then maybe tailor it as we go along to see if there's a way of tenants, commercial tenants, being helped as well. Remembering that very often one of the problems is that it is the tenants who pay, for instance, for power. So the property owners don't care whether there's solar panels or not. But I think those are the things we should work with. And this is an important tool. And hopefully there might be a way of actually helping businesses that are tenants to do it, which is what we were looking at in 2017, if we revisit that. Thank you.
Anything further? I just know before I take Councillor McGregor, two things. This is, I congratulate all the councillors involved in it. I know that Councillor Shrub raised the issue way back in 2015 as well, and we've got to the point we're at. I also notice reading the documentation from staff, what staff are actually supporting is assessing the feasibility of it. At this stage, that's as far as their support goes. They may be convinced, they may not, let's see. But I just, without speaking to the item, add my own support strongly for this as well. Councillor McGregor.
Just a comment, Mr. Mayor, from memory, the thing was not considered feasible last time after we sought interest in it and got very limited interest in it. It'd be great to get increased interest from it, and every time I go to the cultural centre and look out over that Woolworths roof, I think, why not? I mean, just a no-brainer. So.
Yep, thank you. And Councillor McGregor, I well remember a meeting in my office in the last term of council that you, Councillor Shrub, and I attended with members of the community on this issue. So let's hope we get it off the ground this time. I agree. Any further speakers on this? There's one matter before us. This hasn't been spoken against. I'll put it all those in favour. Against, declare it carried unanimously. If I can ask those not speaking to take their microphones off. There's three urgencies, two are in my name, and they're first, so I'll vacate the chair for the Deputy Mayor, and he can rule on whether they're urgent or not.
You'd like to move your matter of urgency, and Councillor Christie seconding it, I gather?
Yes.
And I've read it, and I say that it's a matter of urgency. You have the floor, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I don't raise this matter in any way to make a sensationalist statement, only that the anti-vax group has indicated in its online advertisements that it intends over the next matter of weeks to visit the Blue Mountains, specifically Katoomba. I know that a resolution very similar to this passed Sydney City Council this week and Newcastle City Council previously. I know that at Newcastle, the passage of the resolution supported the group to meet in the back blocks of Newcastle on private land. I don't wish to score any points with this. I am very concerned, particularly about the messaging around COVID-19. I don't support the general messaging of this group. Were it not for the pandemic, I might yield to the edict of free speech, but during the pandemic, I am particularly concerned about some of the anti-COVID-19 comments. I see on Facebook even people who surprise me. People comment upon COVID-19 in a way that diminishes its seriousness. Some of the messaging from this group does that, and I think there is a significant danger to the community, particularly now, for there to be messaging that contradicts the important health messaging that is being put out. We've seen what happened in Victoria. New South Wales is not out of the woods yet, and I think, you know, during a global pandemic, the significance of which we haven't seen since the years after the First World War, it is important that we do our best as civic leaders to allow science to prevail and not to allow messaging to be put out there that could, in fact, confuse members of the community. I do cavil with the general messaging of the group around vaccinations, but were it not for the COVID-19 pandemic, I would probably not seek to prevent them from speaking as I do now. This motion goes much further than the previous motion, which I supported and Councillor Christie put forward, and I thank him for his support tonight. The effect of this resolution, as was seen in Newcastle, and I know Sydney City hopes for the same, is that it will prevent this group holding their rallies or their meetings on public land. We'll seek to enjoin police and other state agencies and Commonwealth agencies to support us, as they did in Newcastle, to prevent this group from spreading what is a dangerous, inflammatory and frankly, irresponsible message at a very important time for our community. This council's taken a strong leadership stance when it comes to COVID-19. We closed our city up very quickly. We were one of the first councils to go as far as we did, and we opened our city again when it was safe to do so and based on the medical advice. It is not a time for us to tolerate messaging that could confuse and put members of our community at risk. Not now, not during the pandemic. It's irresponsible of this group to be doing it. And I think for them to be doing this and having this tour during the pandemic just shows what an irresponsible group of people they really are. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Does the seconder wish to speak? No, he doesn't. Is there any other councillor wish to speak? With that, Mr. Mayor, I'll put the motion. All in favour? I declare it carried unanimously. Your second matter of urgency, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, you rule it's urgent, Mr.
Yes,
Deputy?
I do, Mr. Mayor.
And Councillor Christie's got his hand up.
Seconded, yep.
Back in, I believe it was 2015, if I'm out by 1 year, I apologise, but I believe it was 2015, the Blaxland Chamber of Commerce received a grant, I understand, in the vicinity of $150,000. Councillor Christie will nod or shake his head if I'm wrong about that. And that grant back then was to install CCTV cameras in the Blaxland shopping precinct to assist with crime prevention and crime detection. You would recall about 12 months ago an article in the Sunday press around a sexual assault that occurred in Blaxland by a person or person in company, and that the detection of this crime was not aided by the lack of CCTV footage, even though the cameras were present. In recent weeks, I've been contacted by one local business. I understand since they contacted me, 2 more have been impacted by attempted break-ins or real break-ins, certainly attempted break-ins in Blaxland. I visited the business in question. The attempted break-in of his business occurred underneath one of these cameras. He and I stood there and watched the camera swivel and look in our direction, but evidently the camera doesn't work still. The business owner raised the matter with the Blaxland Chamber of Commerce. I understand no satisfactory explanation has been forthcoming as to why, after 5 years, there is still no functioning cameras. Frankly, what I seek to do tonight is to write to the Blaxland Chamber of Commerce seeking an explanation about why these cameras are not functioning, despite the outlay of public money and incidents that have occurred. That explanation may or may not be a good and reasonable explanation. I hope it is a good explanation after 5 years. If it is, it's my intention to publish that. But I also intend to write to the Commonwealth Agency, I believe it's Home Affairs, responsible for this grant. I would do so through a local member and through the relevant minister and ask for their intervention. That intervention should occur in order to rectify the problem, but also to report to the community the reason for the non-functioning of the cameras when they were expected to function some half a decade ago. Frankly, I can't understand why this is still an issue. I'd like to have an explanation. In moving this tonight, I condemn and judge no one. What I seek is an explanation for the public to understand that explanation, given the crimes that have occurred, whether that explanation is good or bad, for that to be understood, but also for the relevant agency to intervene in this matter and assist. It may be that the Chamber of Commerce needs assistance to make this work. It may be that they've done their best and the Commonwealth needs to help them. But in any event, this isn't good enough. It was an outlay of public money, and whatever the reason, it needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed now, and the explanation for why the cameras haven't worked needs to be made very clear and very transparently to the public. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Does the seconder wish to say something?
Just very briefly, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I couldn't agree more with what Councillor Greenhill, Mr. Mayor, just stated. Quite frankly, my heart goes out to these businesses. They were promised the CCTV as a crime prevention method. Now that everybody knows that these cameras aren't working, it seems to have caused the complete opposite. These cameras have missed a serious sexual assault, and they're unable to record break-ins of our local businesses, even when people are right underneath them. Quite frankly, it's not good enough. And Mr. Deputy Mayor, I just want businesses of Blaxland to know that we're there behind them. We support them. Our hearts go out for them, and we want them to be able to go to work safely. And that's what we intend to do.
Thanks. You. Does anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Hollywood.
Sorry, just trying to get off mute. Look, I wanted to just say how concerned I am when we're talking about issues related to community safety. And we know that CCTV cameras have been installed in quite a number of towns and villages, and they've been funded by the federal government, and they are expected to be working so to protect our community. I think it's really disappointing and indeed heartbreaking that we've actually seen coverage of the concerns that the Mayor mentions that this has been an ongoing issue for 5 years, but it was actually raised in the mainstream media, not just our local paper, but also in the mainstream media last year. And it seems strange, and I think this is why we do need this motion, very happy to support it. It seems very strange that no action has been taken, or that's what it appears anyway. And now it seems that crime is escalating, and whilst break-ins are not good, I'm also really worried about the broader community safety issues for particularly, I would hate to see any other assaults occur, and it's, yeah, so I really commend this motion as well. There's nothing more important than community safety.
Thank you, Councillor Hollywood. If there are Councillor Brown.
Yes, I have concerns because what's happening here, it's not just Blaxland. I mean, these very expensive cameras, it's the same in Allura. I think they were like 120,000 or something. And then there ends up being this very expensive maintenance cost. And we're asking, when we ask for these chambers, we're asking for basically voluntary groups. And it's not like all the businesses, it's not a formal organisation, it's a voluntary organisation. They have to sort of fundraise, and what's happening is they're ending up being responsible for like a law and order issue, it seems. Like I'm concerned where the responsibility is shifting to. And you know, the fact that, I mean, I'm astonished that these cameras all seem to stop working after like a year or just after they run out of their warranty. So I think there are issues about who is responsible, that they get these big grants, what's not built into it is the maintenance, and they can be quite extortionate, those costs. So I'm uncomfortable because it's like we're saying that the chambers are responsible, and I'm not sure why they would be. I mean, there's just some of the businesses who happen to choose to join a community group to try and improve, you know, the CBD usually, but you know, this is something else when we're talking about assaults. In my case, it's people stealing plants from Lura Mall in Katoomba, but I'm just uncomfortable about where we seem to be directing the responsibility. Yeah, and so I'm not exactly, I don't think I can, I maybe am speaking against it in that I feel as it's worded, it's not necessarily quite fair.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Fell.
Just on a point of order, Deputy Mayor, I would say that was a speech against and will seek the right of reply.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Fell.
Thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Look, I totally support the motion as it's been put forward, and I think having had some experience with CCTV cameras in Springwood, and that's going back well over a decade now, that I guess the motivation's often a good motivation that the chambers may well have, but I'm not sure that they realise, as Councillor Brown has indicated to some extent, it might not have been quite the intention, but has indicated that you get into an absolute quagmire with these CCTV cameras, because there's not just the maintenance cost, there's the actual surveillance. You know, who is actually going to be responsible for the data and who's going to be on board to do it. And I think quite often people think that they'll be okay to do it. I'm sure they think they can, but the reality is it's extremely difficult. And I think that when they run into difficulty, they should really put their hand up and say, look, this is a bigger thing than we realised, and we can't handle it. And I think it's not terribly noble of the federal government to say that issues such as public safety in the streets and in business areas is going to be down to people who do it on a voluntary basis, monitor it on a voluntary basis. I think that the issues that come up from this, and I'm sure that the response that we get from the chamber in this case will probably highlight the fact that there's a need for something to be done in a much more coordinated fashion, that the ad hoc way it's approached is just a way of trying to deal with it on the cheap, and it really doesn't work. And it, in some cases, we're talking about issues of just pure public safety. You know, I mean, obviously that, I presume that assault case, that sexual assault case, was not related to some business per se, but was just the fact that it's a public space. And the surveillance of that is unfortunately in many cases necessary. And I think we need to make sure that it's done by people who are competent and able to do it.
Thank you, Councillor Phil. Mr. Mayor, you have the right to reply if there's no other speakers. Councillor Greenhill, you have the right to reply.
Yes. Mr. Deputy Mayor, this is certainly not a case of blaming chambers of commerce who take this on. People, I think, should perhaps listen to what I actually said. What I said was that there may in fact be a good reason for this. I actually then went and said it might not be fair to the chambers of commerce and perhaps the Commonwealth should be assisting them more. What I also said was what was missing here was an explanation. When businesses come to myself and Councillor Christie because they're not getting an explanation from whomever about why these cameras aren't working when, the functioning of them was paraded before the media in 2015. The former federal member and the chamber, hailed a new era of safety. That is all great. But what's missing now is an explanation. People want to know why they're not working and when they will be working. That's what I seek. In addition to that, for the Commonwealth Agency to step in and help. Now, it may well be that the chamber needs help. We'll give them that help. But the community wants an explanation. They deserve that explanation. And I want to make it very clear, I am not apportioning blame. And I was very, very careful with my language tonight to make sure I absolutely did not do that. In fact, in terms, I made it clear that I wasn't. I've not mentioned any individual, nor have I mentioned any individual's position. I've simply mentioned the issue and the desire of the community, the shopkeepers, to know why they're not working, when they will be working, and to call upon the Commonwealth to render whatever assistance is necessary to ensure that they do. This resolution is not about blame at all. It's about fixing a problem and explaining what's gone on with great transparency, nothing more. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. That's the right of reply. So I'll put the motion. All in favour, say aye. I declare it unanimous with Councillor Schreiber out of the off the Zoom. I think he's left the meeting, so I'll like that recorded. Mr. Mayor, you have the floor. The chair again.
Kerry changed her mind.
Beg your pardon?
Kerry changed her mind.
Councillor Brown changed the mind.
Kerry's entitled to, Councillor Brown didn't change her mind at all. The councillor is entitled to speak one way and be convinced by the debate.
Well, I didn't say I was speaking against it. It was taken that way. I was unclear, but that's fine.
Councillor Brown, I didn't give you the call. But
No,
Councillor Brown is entitled, as any councillor is, to listen to the debate prior to voting. And in fact, the debate should inform all of you in terms of how you vote. You shouldn't enter the debate with a fixed view. So Councillor Brown approached that last matter intelligently and should not be called on it in any negative way. I reject that suggestion very strongly. There is a matter of urgency standing in the name of Councillor McGregor in relation to Airwatch. I do deem that it is urgent. It's moved Councillor McGregor, seconded Councillor Hollywood. Councillor McGregor has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and it's regrettable, really, that this has had to come before you again after after you acted upon that request in January this year, and the request to reinstall the air quality monitoring in Lithgow and the Blue Mountains was rejected by the EPA. Since then, though, as you can see in the motion, the New South Wales Public Inquiry has heard evidence from qualified health experts that 400 people died as a direct result of the smoke generated by bushfires over our black summer of fires, and a further 4,000 were hospitalised. So while our emergency services were battling the Gospers Mountain and the Greenwattle Creek complex of fires, there was a whole lot of people battling serious health issues, and just as our firefighting services need good and real-time information about the threats that are pressing on us, so too do people who are likely to experience possibly fatal health events because of the bushfires. So I commend the motion to you. And
okay, does the seconder wish to speak? or yield? Seconder yields. Councillor Hoare, did you wish to speak?
Oh, look, just to express my very strong support for this motion. I have a very deep interest in air quality monitoring, and would like to announce that I've actually got one installed via Jenny Leong's office, looking on behalf of the Community Environmental Monitoring Network, which has been installed on my rooftop for about 6 weeks or so now. And it's as part of a much broader network, of course. Not all that many units in that network, but it does produce some very, very interesting data, and I'm sure it'll provide a very good basis for comparison for a larger scheme, which I think is also worth advocating for. Thank you.
Anything further on this matter? There's nothing further. There's one matter. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. Executive Officer, I believe, through the CEO, that is the last item of business.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
There's no confidential items we need to attend to that we're dealt with?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Well, just before I go any further, I'll check a message from Storm, who controls all things in relation to this. Thank you, Storm. I got your message. There being no further business, I'll take a motion to close the meeting. It's moved Councillor Hollywood, seconded Councillor Vanderclay. All those in favour?
Can I say something? Sorry.
Yes, Councillor Hollywood, you may. You may.
I just wanted to recognise that many people are participating in the virtual Trek for Timor, which raises money for the community of Hartabilico, which we have an enduring and deep friendship relationship with. And there's a countdown on, it finishes at the end of October. So if you want to sponsor participants, you can do that, including I'm participating as well. I've got 22 Ks to go. But on a more serious note, it is actually a major fundraiser for the work and the friendship relationship that we have as the City of Blue Mountains with Hartabilico. So I just wanted to recognise that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? There's one matter before us. I'll put it. All those in favour? Oh, Councillor Christie, did you have something to say? Or are you just keen to vote? Okay. One matter before us. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. I bid you all a fond good night and also to the community. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Everybody. Thank you, Star.
And if you can convey our best wishes to Councillor Bowling, it'd be very great.
Yes, please, Mick, if you can do that, much appreciated.